So once we get over the fact that, again, equals and these arrows, we treat it the same way. We don't like this plus minus thing here. So adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a number. So I'm just going to rewrite it that way whenever I see one like this. And once I do that, then what's my one step to get my x by itself? How can I get that minus 14 out of there? Add it. Perfect. So when I add it, and whatever I do to one side, I got to do both, because like we were talking about before, most of the time we don't wear one sock or, you know, just, yes, or just shave one side of your face. Nicely done. So what I'm going to do here is, again, it's just an arrow instead of having an equals sign. And we'll get to a point where we do some graphing with this. But for now, we're content just having it this way. Okay? And that's it. You're like, well, if it's that easy, shoot. So when I get to the next one, it's the same idea. My goal is always to get the y by itself. So again, let's talk opposites. Opposite of adding 21 to y. Minus. And if the whole adding and subtracting of positives and negatives isn't your thing, go ahead and use the calculator. There's nothing wrong with that. 7 minus 21. Think about it this way. I got $7. Ooh, I just spent 21. Well, I know I'm in the hole. I'm in the hole 14 bucks. Because again, I just subtract that and keep my sign. Ooh. But they can get a little more complex here and there. So, here's what we always got to do first. We're going to move the variable. Oops, I got the wrong side. Sorry about that. We're going to move the variable that's on the right, okay? Because we have to get them together first. So, because we always want it to be on the left side. It just makes it easier when we try to do graphing in a little while. But I like to pretend that this inequality arrow is kind of like a river, in that if I need to get it from one side to the other, I got to do an opposite. Got to get through there. So what's the opposite of a positive 9y? Negative. So I have to do negative 9y to both sides, because I don't want y's on the right side anymore. I just want them on the left. So 8 minus 9 is negative 1y. But you'll notice I still have the plus 3 over here. Okay, that hasn't changed. Still got my arrow. But now over here, all my y's are gone. All I've got left is the minus 14. So now it's more like a regular equation. My goal? Get that y term by itself. And I like boxing it in just to remind me what I'm doing. How do I get rid of this? Subtract it. So you're like, wow, this problem's a little longer. Sometimes they get a little longer. Okay, and then if I owe somebody $14 and I borrow 3 more, I've borrowed 17. Now here's the part with inequalities that gets a little tricky, and we're going to talk about it right here. We got the variable on the left side. Y is not quite by itself yet. Right now I'm multiplying it by negative 1. So what's the opposite of multiplying? Divide. Here's the catch. You're like, okay, there's y. Negative divided by negative is positive. But I have to switch the arrow around because I divided by a negative. Okay? So when you, we're going to rewrite this. When you divide both sides by a negative, you have to switch the arrow. If I don't, I get the wrong half of the answers, because then I'd get all the numbers that are bigger than 17. I want all the numbers that are bigger. I want the numbers that are smaller. So that's what I'm kind of on the lookout here for. It's going to get a little tricky otherwise. So let's try that again on this number 4 right below and kind of see how this works, because sometimes just doing it once doesn't quite make it click. All right, goal number 1. All variables on the left, okay? But they're not all on the left. I got some on the right. So I got to get them out of there. I got a positive 2r. I want to move it. I got to do the opposite. When you sort of think before, if you want one of your friends to go away or do something, if you know they don't like something, you do that, and then they go away. So it's kind of the same thing here. 3r minus 2r is 1r. And I copy everything else. And I remember, oh yeah, there's no r's here anymore. So that's going to be 14. But I'm lucky this time because I got only one step left. R's already has no number. What's my last step? How do we dump minus 17? Add it. And I'm good. R is greater than or equal to 31. Okay, it's the number's bigger than 31. And you're like, what's up on this last one? Now it's a word problem? Yes. We get a word problem. Joanna's tests were 87, 93, 88, 94. What must her 5th test grade be to get a total of at least 459? Okay. So let's see. She got 87 and 93 and 88 and 94, but I don't know what she got on her 5th test grade. So I'm just going to use a variable. I'm going to use x because I don't know. And the only other thing I got to figure out, at least, now if I had to go back to my note sheet, I could, but at least means it's going to be something better than that. Okay? Something bigger, something larger, something greater. So now, once I got that, I guess it'd be in my best interest to add these up next, wouldn't it? So let's get this over here, and let's add these up. Because again, the only way we get better at anything is by continuing to try it. Otherwise, it's kind of senseless. That just made this a little easier to work with. My variable's on the left, that's good. And I want this to be by itself. So my last step's to do the opposite of that positive 362. So we'll minus that out. Let's see here. Whew, 97. Holy cow. So she needs to get at least 97 if she wants that many points. It's kind of a tall order. Hope there's a lot of questions. But you'll notice that's the only real difference between these and equations is now we've got this arrow in the middle, and occasionally it's got to change a little bit. So then, if we flip over, you're going to find out multiplying and dividing is going to have some of the same types of things. Still notes, which again, you're going to have the ability to use Friday on the quiz if you want to. Okay. So here, okay, now we'll come back to the new step here in a minute. For now, we're going to come down a little bit. So now I look and I go, okay, well, these are kind of done for me, but let's talk about this. If I'm dividing by 4, okay, my opposite of divide, and again, that's like some number over x over 2, x over 8, whatever your variable happens to be, okay, is to multiply, just like the opposite. Oops, I gotta learn how to spell multiply here. Multiply is to divide. They're opposites, okay? And it's going to continue to be whatever I do to one side, I got to do to both. So when I'm looking at these, I'm like, okay. So I check out my first example, and it's like k divided by negative 4 equals 13. Okay, well, I got to do an opposite. So if I want to get k by itself, I need to multiply both sides by negative 4. And I did that right here below. So the negative 4's job over on the left is just to cancel out the fraction. I don't multiply the top by negative 4. This is done its job. 13 times negative 4 is negative 52. Oh, switch the inequality. We're going to switch the inequality if I multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, sort of like what we mentioned on the front. So since I multiplied both sides by negative 4, I had to flip my arrow. I had to switch the inequality, because again, otherwise I'd get the wrong half of the answers, and nobody wants to do that. So then I look, and I'm like, okay, so if I multiply or divide both sides by a negative, I got to switch the arrow. So I look, okay, solve. X divided by 3 is less than negative 10. Multiply both sides by 3. Okay? We know that cancels. Do I switch the inequality? Well, I multiplied both sides, but I multiplied by positive 3. Okay? That's not a negative number. So no. No, I don't switch the inequality. Because 3 is not a negative number. The only time I'm going to switch the arrow or flip the inequality is if I multiply or divide both sides by a negative. So let's kind of reinforce that here. Now here's one thing I want you to do on this next one. Negative a over 4 is less than negative 6. I don't like the way this is set up. We're going to change this a little. We're going to change this into a over negative 4 is less than 6. You're like, well, why are you moving that? Because I want the negative or positive on my number. It's going to make this easier. Okay, so we're going to move the negative here and wipe that out. So just like we did on the others, since I'm dividing by negative 4, okay, we don't want that, I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 4. It's going to save me a step. So this is still a. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. Do I need to flip the inequality arrow this time? Yeah. Because I multiplied by a negative number. I multiplied by negative 4. So I switched the arrow. And that's the only thing we've got to keep track of as we're doing all of this stuff with the inequalities, really. This next example, I'm multiplying by negative 8. So I got to do the opposite and divide by negative 8. So cross those out. Do I switch the inequality? Absolutely. Here I divided by negative 8. I divided by a negative. Whenever I divide or multiply by a negative, I got to flip the arrow. But it's got to be both sides. So what about the last one then? On that last one, looks like I'm going to divide both sides by 7. Am I going to need to flip the arrow this time? No. Absolutely not. Because 7 is positive that I would be, positive that I would be dividing by, so I wouldn't do it, because otherwise I'd get the wrong half of the answers. So here's what our task at hand is going to be here. And again, if you haven't been labeling, I'm going to really start pressuring that you do here. Okay? This guy here is going to be homework check number 3, assignment number 2. Because the first one we had was that adding and subtracting equations worksheet from yesterday. So this will be number 2. And your job, and they're like, oh, graph it on a number line. Wait a minute, what's going on here? Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to solve these. I'm not worried about the check, but the graph it on a number line. I'm going to rewind for a second on one thing. I want to show you something to make sure it's on your notes, because then you can use it on the quiz. So I'm going to take this back off for a second. Let's say, for instance, let me go to the front of your note packet. We're just going to graph a couple of these. So here's what I want you to do when it comes to graphing something. We're going to make us a quick little number line. We're just going to put 3 lines on it. The number that you've got for your answer always goes in the middle. And then I do 1 less to the left and 1 more to the right. And what we're going to do is this. When we're trying to figure out to graph these, whatever the arrow is, as long as our x value or whatever variable is on the left, our arrow is going to go the same way. But there's one little thing we've got to watch for. If we have either greater than or less than, okay, we're going to use an open dot on that number to signify that we want it included or not. If our arrow has a line under it, we're going to use a colored dot to signify it. So on this first one, I'm going to have an open dot here on 30, and then just follow the arrow to put it on your sheet. And head to the left. So if we're doing this on any of these, my number goes in the middle. Now this is where it gets tricky with negatives. 1 less, if I owe somebody $14 and I borrow another, now I owe them $15. If I owe them $14 and I pay them $1 back, I only owe $13. And again, I start looking, I'm like, okay, open circle because there's no line underneath it, and then just follow the arrow since my variable's on the left. And that's basically what we're up to. I'll do one more, and then we can work a couple on the homework. All right, I'm going to have you help me with some parts here. So if we move down to number 4, where we've got 31 in the middle, what number is going to be on the left? 30. And what about the number on the right? 32. So here's the only thing that changes. I notice there's a line underneath my arrow now.
Closed dot.
Yeah, it's a closed dot. So we'll go closed dot, and then follow the arrow. That's our game plan on this, okay? So when I'm doing these, let me switch back over to our homework. Here's typically what a homework question is going to end up looking like. So here, I want to get my A by itself. So I do the opposite of what's being done to it. I'm minusing 12 here. I'm going to plus 12 to it. So that'll wipe that out. A is going to be less than 18. Again, we'll keep our variables in the left. And then all I'm going to do with that is make my number line with 3 spots. One number less, one number greater. And then the only two things I got to do here, there's no line underneath, so we're going open and follow the arrow since my variable term's always going to be on the left, and I'm good. Now, the only other thing again, and we've got an example, but we'll do this one. Let's do number 2. Since I want all my variables on the left, I don't want this one there, so I'm going to minus it. And if I don't see a number in front of x, we always assume that it's 1. So those cancel. If I have 2 x's and I take one away, I've only got one left. Oh, and I'm done already. That's kind of nice. My answer in the middle, one value to the left, one value to the right. And I go, all right, let's see. Line underneath, got to close my dot. Okay, close my dot. And less than's going to the left. Okay, and I'm good. And the one other small thing I'll mention here is we are going to skip number 5 for right now. We have enough fun with the regular stuff. We don't need to go into crazy fractional mode here. So on the first sheet, on worksheet 1, we're going to take care of number 5 there. And then when we flip over to the back, I want to help out with number 8. Okay. And then we'll take a look at number 8 and number 9 here. Okay, so on the back sheet of the packet, the multiplication division one, since I'm trying to get m alone, I'm dividing it by 4 right now, so the opposite of divide is to multiply. And again, when you do that, it's just to cancel out what's on the bottom. So I multiply that by 4. What's my last step going to be on this one to get m alone since I'm multiplying it by -3? Divide. And here's where I got to be careful, because I'm dividing by a negative on both sides. And when we divide by a negative, we have to flip the inequality arrow. And when we graph, again, one less. If I borrow another $1, now I owe 25. If I pay $1 back, now I only owe 23. I got a filled in dot because of the line. And I've got greater than. And then for 9 and 10, we got a setup. All right. 36, all right, is at least. And again, you've got a note sheet that's got that chart that has all these things on it. That's fair game to use on this. But at least is greater than or equal to 1/2 of a number. And I could either write 1/2 x, or I could just take it and make a fraction out of it like this. What would be my one step once I get it set up to get x by itself? What's my opposite of dividing by -2? Multiply. Okay. So your task tonight is to kind of work through these, because tomorrow we're going to have a review to get you ready for the quiz on Friday. That's going to basically bring us up to everything we've done so far. Inequalities, order of operations, equations, all that stuff. And then we'll kind of see where we're going from there.